Hello and Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to our event today. I'm your host, Madalina Andrei, former Global Mobility Coordinator, currently Partnership Manager with xpath.global. For those of you who do not know yet about xpath.global, we are the first SaaS-enabled marketplace digital ecosystem in the global mobility sector. To simply put it in a different sentence, we're the first digital platform that enables the direct relationship between local and regional experts and professionals, offering specialized services like destination services, immigration, visa, tax, social security, and corporate clients in need of such services around the world. We are kickstarting this year with this is the first event for 2022, and it's actually the 17th LinkedIn Live event from the xpath.NEXUS series, which has as main goal to become the place where we can share best practices in our industry, learn from each other, and most importantly, grow together. This episode focuses on pains and gains of implementing, using, and developing technology within the global mobility sector. And we'll have some great questions and amazing answers because I'm together with two exceptional tech aficionado women, Global Mobility Program Manager and the CTO, and together we'll explore their shared pains and gains when it comes to developing and implementing technology. Before giving the floor to my guests, I would like to thank all the attendees for joining us and for watching the session. Please feel free to say hello, to drop your comments, or address any of the questions you might have live. I would kindly ask my guests now to briefly introduce themselves, and we can start alphabetically with Bianca.
Thank you, Madalina. Thank you. Welcome everyone on the first session of 2022. Very happy to be here together with Laura and Madalina and kick off 2022 with the topic of technology. As you can see, my name is Bianca Budai, and I'm working in global mobility industry since many years now. I've been working in the industry for over 8 years from an entry-level position, so I can say that I spent my whole career in global mobility. Starting from quite an administrative, really entry-level role, moving to an end-to-end assignment management role that I've done for a couple of years. And then on the learning curve, I moved up to be an expert and advise on the policies. Right now, I'm working as the Global Mobility Program Manager, mainly responsible for the concept itself, the program, framework, policies, and I'm working at Nokia right now. Why am I sitting here discussing technology? Because I had a chance earlier in my career to lead a global mobility assignment management system implementation project. And when I joined my current employer, they just finalized implementing the solution there. It might sound like a good time to join a company when they kind of finish the implementation, but we will talk about it later, that implementation doesn't necessarily end with the go live date. Not to spoil anything that's going to come, but this is my role here to share from a client perspective how we experienced those months and years spent with the implementation.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Bianca. Looking forward to your answers. Laura?
Hi, thanks, Madalina, and thanks everyone who's joining us today. My name is Laura Michaud. I am not from the global mobility industry originally. I've been working in software for the past, it's been over 15 years now. I have started off as a software developer, actually, and then pretty much went through all the stages of everything that's involved in developing software products, from leading a technical team, project management, product management, business analyst, and so on. And after having my first child, my husband and I decided to take it a step forward and start our own software development and consulting company. We've been doing that for over 10 years now, and we've been working with international clients where we've helped them through all stages of developing a software product, from conception to actual development and to marketing and then to adoption. once they started gaining traction and having it, selling it. Recently, I've been introduced to the global mobility industry when I joined xpath as a CTO. And I've been involved from the very beginning in developing the ecosystem of xpath global. And I can say that I'm very excited to be part of this industry nowadays, and I think it's fascinating, really.
Thanks a lot, Laura. Well, excellent. Thank you very, very much for joining us. I'm personally really, really fond of this topic, as you are as well. The fact that we have as our guests two amazing women experts in their line of work talking about tech makes it even so much more interesting, right? So I'll start with Bianca and a more general question as an intro to our topic, right? Thinking about the tech systems, the tech platforms used inside companies or specifically inside global mobility departments, would you say that there is an increasing trend in using these, comparing the current situation with what was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, for example?
Definitely 100%. This trend is there, of course, and I actually wouldn't specify it to the global mobility industry itself first, because we see this trend also in other HR departments and even moving out from HR in other functions. I think the pandemic as well gave a little push to this, because all these remote situations and need for automation made companies think, what are the solutions out there and what are those digital solutions and technologies that make actually possible this remote working and potentially less resources and lower cost, which is, I think, on the top of the priority of every company after these 2 years of COVID.
Sure.
And in terms of being digitally savvy and tech savvy, an interesting thing I wanted to mention is about how HR competencies changed over the years. If we compare it to 5 years ago, I came across to an HR competency matrix. It's kind of a report that was prepared by a market research company, analyzing what kind of skills an HR professional and global mobility professional itself has to have to be relevant and on the market and be able to support a business.
Can you share them with us? Can you share them with us?
Of course. And the very interesting thing was to me that technology and digital skills, they were in the top category for every HR professional. You said 5 years ago or 3 years ago, yes, back then we had it there. I think we had it there, but it was all the core HR competencies that you had to have. And on top of that, as kind of a plus, you also had to have some kind of basic understanding of the technologies used. You had to be open to these topics. But now this is kind of switching, and it seems that this is becoming the core. And this is what we see as well. And also in other departments, they are seeking for opportunities all the time. They are looking for other automated solutions. So I think this is really thriving. And it, of course, depends on the industry as well. Coming from a technology company, it's easy to say because it's kind of the core what we do, the heart. So it's not difficult to push something like this through. But also in other industries, so not only technology, but there as well, this is the way to go.
Excellent. Bianca, imagining a company decides to adopt a certain tech product, a system or whatever you want to call it. What would be the main motivation factors behind this decision? It's supposed to fill, I don't know, certain gaps, to improve internal processes. What advantages it brings in the end?
It's interesting that you were referring them as gaps. I wanted to mention this word as well before. So I think what's happening and what has happened with the companies that already introduced the solution, that something didn't feel right or something caused challenge or caused headaches for the teams, for the assignees, for the stakeholders. And these were the gaps that this technology is actually filling. So first came the realization of these gaps in terms of the amount of resource and time needed to manage even the smallest program. So you had to have a bigger team of people to make sure that the assignee experience on a level that you want to reach. Excel based, everything was, we all know everything was Excel based. Still the whole world is Excel based, I know, but back then without those systems we were relying on Excel so much. I remember in my first workplace we actually had a team called reporting team. I don't know if it at that company it still exists anymore, but just imagining having one FTA sitting and preparing reports from Excel, from different systems. And now it's just wonderful if you think about it, that this is now one push of a button, or if not, of course it's a bit accelerating, but it's easier, much easier. You don't need a whole team of people merging and splitting Excel data from one to another. So that was definitely a gap. I would also mention data accuracy, because whenever you do manual work, whenever you are relying on human responsibility, then of course there are going to be manual errors, and especially in the industry of global mobility, one little mistake can then have a big effect later on. So that type of data accuracy and reporting ability is also something that was not there before, or it was a lot more difficult to achieve. Being able to advise business based on reports, and also beautiful charts that are created just in a second. So I think those are definitely the gaps there, that now with these technologies it's filled, and the advantage that it brings, that those team members, being busy with Excel reporting before, they can actually have more value-added work, value-added in terms of the assignee experience, or focusing on improving the processes, for example, because those things were in the background only when there was so much manuality involved.
Yeah, super. Thanks a lot, Bianca. We have a lot of guests attending the event. Thank you very much for watching us. I have a question for you, Bianca, from Vini. Hello, Vini. Lovely seeing you with us. What other technology, mobility-related technology, do you use internally to complement whatever other systems you have in place? And if your system contains mobility modules, because they are implementing Workday, and we will have some additional functionality to track and monitor mobility.
Initially, when introducing the assignment management system, we immediately connected it with the HRIS system, which is a great thing to do. It helps you save a lot of headache and also a lot of additional work that you would require from the user, a lot of time saved for managers, assignees, everyone. So we did that. And with those HRIS systems, I know they have mobility modules, but they are not that evolved, because those are, of course, not built for that. So all those, I've also used multiple systems mobility features, but it's not something you would compare to a specific assignment management system. It's there, you can use it for basic things, but having this umbrella of all the functionalities, I would say it was not like ready for that. But we connected them, so all the data flows. And regarding the vendors, I remember having a question maybe about the vendors there as well. It's happening now.
Yeah, we have it later.
Oh, sorry, I thought Winnie was also asking about.
But we can, sure, because whatever happens down the supply chain will affect you directly. So please.
Yes. Yes. So just to stick in a bit the HRIS system, no, we are not using other systems. This was also one of the goals we had, to have one single source of truth. This is how we like to call.
Oh, that's so poetic. That is so poetic, Bianca.
It is poetic.
So great.
It shows the passion we have towards our assignment management system as well. So we don't want too much interference or need for user to log into other systems, but we try to connect whatever is possible.
Great, super. Thanks a lot. Turning to our to the other guest, Laura. Before reaching the decision to adopt a certain tech product, right? Somebody has an initial idea what the tech product would be like. Yeah? what was your beginning with xpath global? And because at some point a couple of years ago, a client walked through your door with an idea in her mind. Yeah. How did
Yeah.
everything start?
Right. So, I've personally lived abroad before, and my husband has lived in at least 3 countries on 2 continents. So we're not strangers personally of what it means to relocate, and we also know firsthand what kind of challenges and obstacles you face when you move somewhere else, and even things that you wouldn't even think of when you make that decision to move to a different
Mhm.
country. And it was challenging for sure. And so when Elena came through and she told me that she wants to build global mobility marketplace, and she started explaining what the industry is about, I had no idea about this industry whatsoever. I didn't even know it existed. And I was like, immediately, like, oh my gosh, it could have solved so many problems for me if I had this throughout, the majority of my life. So it was good to know that those type of service solutions are there. And it's that, I guess that's how it started. We got hooked immediately on the idea. It resonated a
Okay.
lot with us personally. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned the word idea, right? So we do
Yeah.
have a client and we do have the idea at this point. But you know that there are clients that have richer imagination than others, right? So
Yeah.
now I have a series a series of interrelated questions for you. How do you assess the idea as not being, as I say, a fluffy unicorn dancing on rainbows idea, right? Feasible,
Hmm.
doable,
Hmm.
reasonable,
Yeah.
and once you assessed it and you deemed it feasible, doable, reasonable, whatever, what are the main points? What were the main points in translating that idea into a specific product, right? I'm thinking, I don't know, for example, have you looked at the competitive landscape in the global mobility sector? Did you make a list of differentiators you had compared to what was out there, or was there a gap?
Hmm.
Where
So, obviously, if you come across an idea that a product that you might want to use personally, it's usually already a good sign. But obviously, the first step is to do your market research. So we started looking at the market, and what we found was that, I mean, for us personally, not knowing what to look for, it was generally difficult to find service providers in the industry. So there was definitely nothing remotely similar to a marketplace out there,
Mhm.
and there was barely anything at all when we first looked into it. And I think from what I understood since that, just in general, the whole industry was not particularly digitalized at that point. Like Bianca was saying, I think a lot of the work was still happening in Excel spreadsheets. So yeah, it wasn't like a big presence online. So we definitely identified a gap there for this product. And the next step is just looking at other similar solutions out there, not maybe for the same industry, but everyone has used a marketplace to buy things online. People have certain expectations when they buy things online, and they expect a certain flow and certain things to happen. So we looked at these big, let's say, competitors from other industries. And we try to figure out how their platforms and their business models would apply to the global mobility industry. Now, of
Mhm.
course, a lot of the marketplaces are designed along selling products and not services, which was a big, difference that we had to take into account. Selling the service is a different process than selling a product, right? Because you have a much longer interaction between the seller and the buyer. And you have to ensure, as a provider of a software solution, that you have the whole process covered. So yeah, the first step was definitely doing market research and trying to understand how to adapt things that people are already familiar with in terms of buying things online to
Mhm.
the specific of the industry. And then the other thing you have to look at is that in the global mobility, you essentially have for large categories of services, right? So you have, like moving and relocation and taxes and so on. And because we wanted to cover all of them, they each have their specific needs and differences. So you have to look at providing tools that are specific to those niches in the end. It's one thing
because the
to
global mobility is like a large umbrella, but underneath you have several sub categories.
It's different to go looking for temporary housing compared to trying to
Work
ship
permits.
things. And work permits is a completely different flow that goes into all of them. So it was basically a lot of the process at the beginning was just understanding the needs of the industry, so we can come up with tools that solve those needs.
That meet the needs. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Laura. We have several questions. I'll start with David. David Welch. Hello, David. Lovely to see you here. We have a question for for either one of you actually. What tech functionality for global mobility is in the near future? Do you see in the near future? I guess that was possibly the question. Or what functionality do you want to see developed? It's not here yet, but you would like to see it. Whichever one of you.
I can go with the fluffy unicorn dream, and then Laura can tell us the reality.
Sounds good to me. Yes.
When I see like future of GM technology, I always think about AI-based solution and all these super modern solution. But actually, it's not the near future; it's already here. Personally, I'm not using them, but I know that there are super things already that quite futuristic to me as well, based on AI and stuff like that. But I was thinking about when I saw David's question is still the assignee experience part. Still, we are at the stage, we are using many systems, a lot of automations going across systems and everything. But still, from employee perspective, what I see is that today they have a lot of resources that they need to find, for example, on company websites or internal websites of the company. We have our own global mobility sites for them, global mobility systems. Then we have our service providers who we reach out to them asking for a lot of different stuff, from filling in documents to reading and checking, approving, acknowledging terms and conditions and all that stuff. And it's still a lot for them to handle in the middle of one of the biggest stresses of life, from moving one country to another and changing positions, moving with family itself as well. So I still see that the administration part or the million different sources of information for employees still there. My dream is that I imagine somehow bringing all these different resources to one single platform where they can handle everything with really pushing a button or auto-populating things for them, so they don't need to fill their passport number 5 times during a relocation process. I still don't see this realized. Now, Laura, you can tell me if it's like completely impossible or not.
Yes, actually, you brought up some really good points, and there are things that we're looking either actively developing or looking into developing in the near future as well. One thing that we're trying to achieve on our side is to make sure that we facilitate as much as possible the whole communication process between essentially the 3 parties involved in GM, which is the HR departments, the employees, and the service providers. Because right now that happens all over the place, and it's really hard for all the people involved to keep up with transfer of information, transfer of documents, and so on. So that's one of the things that we're working on. The other thing is, because you mentioned AI and so on. We are looking at AI too. AI is, it has a lot of potential. I think let's say the trick with AI is that you need to have enough useful data in order to make use of it as its full potential. On the shorter term, what we're looking at is actually RPA. I don't know if you're familiar with the term. It's sort of like robotic process automation. And it helps with automating tasks that are either repetitive or very data critical. So we're talking about repetitive processes that happen the same every time, and that you can easily take off the hands of a human employee and put in a process that handles them. But at the same time, we can look at maybe some compliance processes where you have to be very accurate and very specific. So even though those happen maybe not as often or not as frequently as some of the other smaller tasks, there is a good advantage of using RPA in that area, because you eliminate a lot of the risks of human error when it comes to that.
Super. We'll be going to Steve Asher, who has a question regarding so when developing strategy, what comes first, setting direction or digital transformation of existing processes? I think Bianca, you can take that.
Yes, Steve, thank you for this. Actually, I was going to mention this before when we were talking about the implementation process. I would definitely say setting the direction. Existing processes are great. They are helping you like surviving your days spent with manual work, but they were not built. They were built to a different environment. So when you build those processes, improve those processes year by year, probably, then your tools were completely different, and the participants of the process were completely different. And if you just move that process and try to make the system do exactly the same thing, then you will basically fall into the same cycle, and it's not going to be a real improvement as much as it could be. It will be, of course, but it could be even more. So I would say it's definitely the setting the direction and having very deep, very detailed conversations with your service providers to understand what are your possibilities, because there are maybe even more that you can imagine at the stage. This is what I also experienced, that I thought, okay, then the next process step is this. Let's make the system do that. But then my colleagues working on the system actually told me, look, this is this other way this could actually happen, which would save additional troubles for other participants. So have this conversation, if it has to be step by step going through the process, and you might get surprised that you don't have to just come from the existing process and make the system do the same, but actually there might be better opportunities for that.
Super. Thanks a lot, Bianca. How easy was it for you, and how easy would you believe it's for leaders in general to push for the tech adoption? How hard was it for you, actually?
As I said, I think pandemic definitely helped. The cost savings
I'm sure.
not that much. So companies wanting to invest, GM teams wanting to make their leaders be on board with this might be in a difficult situation in terms of cost saving. This was back then, it was not a technology company, it was a different industry. It's oil and gas, where of course digitalization was important, but not, as I said, in the core, in the heart of everything as with a technology company. So what was difficult to push through is then that leaders were asking, how do you justify this cost? If we look at these couple of hundred people moving around the world and we compare it to the tens of thousands of employees our company has. So how do you justify this small population being valued so high? And then what we actually managed to push through is how we rationalize this is we said that those guys who are moving around the world are usually really senior colleagues, business leaders. You are sending their CEOs, CFOs. Of course, their compensation packages, if you compare it to the remaining tens of thousands of employees, then it's not going to be the same. So you don't have to start from the number of population, but the value these assignees are bringing to the company, and of course the cost that they are costing you as employees. So if you take that ratio, it's already a different thing. And at the end, preparing all these returns of investments, it helped. It was not easy at the start, I have to say, but then it came out really well, and it was very clear for business leaders as well that this population is very special and it's important. So we have to make sure that they are happy.
Super. Thanks a lot. Laura, tech adoption usually it's considered a hassle, right? More often than not, obviously, tech is seen as a pain. You have extensive experience in developing tech for clients working in various industries. What would be the secret, if there is such thing, of making adoption a bit easier within companies and within teams, if there is such a thing?
Well, working in the tech industry, and we're part of teams that actually develop these products. You would think that when it comes to our industry, tech adoption would go smoothly.
Yeah, I think so. I would think
It
that.
doesn't. It really doesn't. I remember, I think, I don't know, about 10 years ago with the team that I had at the time, we decided to move from a project management system that everybody generally hated to a newer, more modern project management system that everyone agreed would solve all our problems. So, naturally, everyone was excited. Everyone was on
So you
board.
are in sync. You are in sync.
Yes.
Everybody was in sync.
Yeah, until we started implementing it and everyone started complaining about it. And we couldn't agree on the workflows. We everyone felt that it's a pain really to get used to it, because what you have to keep in mind is that people don't particularly like change. And the main reason for that is that once you get accustomed to doing a certain thing a certain way, it's very difficult to get out of that routine. You get efficient at doing it, and then when you have to change it, it's an added mental load that you put on yourself. So you're asking people to do the same work, but in a more complicated, less efficient way until they get used to it. So, what we found is really that if you want people to be able to easily adopt a new solution, one of the key factors is how easy is it to use. Because one example that comes to mind was sort of a CRM that we do for like a telco type company. And they were using a system that was built in the 90s, designed in the 90s. You can imagine how it looked and how it behaved. And that particular software was being discontinued. So there was very strict cutoff date of when it was no longer going to be available. And naturally they wanted to get everyone ready in time, have them trained in the new software, and they had customer support teams and technical teams and so on that had to use the new platform. Things didn't go according to plan. It ended up getting released with minimal training on the staff. And I was really happy when I heard that there was barely any issues coming in. And I think the reason for that is, coming from a system that was difficult to use to a new one that one of the essential key components that we put into it was that it was very simple, very clear, with like minimal distractions, minimal interface, very intuitive. So people could just figure out how to use it. And I think that helped a lot with adopting this new system. It was like a breath of fresh air rather than a chore to do.
So I can already see some essential elements that can drive adoption taking shape, right? So, but I'm going to have a specific question for that a bit later. Super. Bianca, you mentioned the pains of implementing the system a bit earlier. Obviously, it was not a walk in the park, or it's still not a walk in the park, right? Thinking about the people allocated for the implementation process, how did you manage that? What was the setup? Did you have to work with two parallel systems for a while? Did you have to work in the offline at the same time? What were the main barriers, the main hiccups during this implementation phase?
Whenever I had the opportunity to be part of an implementation, it was always moving from manual processes to a system. So far in my career, I have never had the joy to move from one system to another. I can imagine it's a different type of challenge than what I've been part of. But I can share what it was like to move from the manual processes to the system. In terms of resourcing, internally from Global Mobility team, we didn't allocate one resource to the project in terms of not doing anything else or in focusing to the project, but we involved team members who already had other operational obligations or whatever their position was requiring for them. Of course, not as before, but kind of reduced responsibilities there. But on top of that, also being part of the implementation project team. Definitely choosing the resources is very important, and choosing the right resources who have on the field daily experience with your processes and assignments, because they are going to be the ones who will be able to tell you that this step was not working so far. If we can find an automated solution for that, it will help. And they will be the ones who not just, as we said, take the process and help you put it in the system, but they will be the ones challenging, because they are feeling every day the pains of that certain gap in the process or something not working. So they will be engaged. And this also reflects to what Laura mentioned on how you make them use the system afterwards. I think if they are part of the creation, their voices are heard, their inputs are taken, it's going to be much more easy to make them actually be engaged and happy for the system to be there. On top of course, everything else that's saving up a lot of time and manuality compared to what happened before. But definitely building your project team with resources who have deep experience with the processes, it's very important. And also in terms of leading the project, I did also other stuff besides leading the project itself. I think that's okay. I mean, it of course depends on how pushed, how much your business is pushing for the implementation time, so making it as short as possible. But if you have the opportunity, you have the luck to and the time to actually allow the time it takes, and again, listen to your service providers, because they have done it multiple times. If they say it's 5 months, it's going to be 5 months. So even if you imagine it can be easily done in like a month, it's not going to be happening. So managing expectations from the start, maybe this is the keyword that I'm trying to say here. So if you manage the expectations right from the start, also internally, also to your stakeholders, explaining that this is what we are doing, there is going to be a go live date, there might be hiccups. Go live doesn't mean that from this day everything is going to be perfectly working without any problems. So then this is going to save a lot of stress and headache for you during the project and on the day of go live, especially.
I would say that maybe the go live date is when the problems actually start rather than stop.
Exactly. Or you basically new type of problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Come
Yeah,
than before. And still about the implementation phase, I would highlight the super importance of testing. What I came across actually multiple times already, that usually by the time the go live date is getting closer, there might be even a little delays caused by the planning phase and earlier phases of the project. And you try to save time on the testing or the training part that also Laura mentioned. But the testing itself, if you planned with your service provider 5 weeks for the planning, for the testing, don't try to save time on that, and don't try to shorten it down just to meet the go live date, because testing is super important. And as we said, problems can come up after the go live. That's completely natural. But you might, with proper testing, with conscious testing, you can reduce that a lot.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks a lot. You mentioned a bit earlier that, of course, perfection in technology, it's a hard thing to achieve. I'm getting back now, Laura, to those essential elements that can drive adoption faster, right? And the question would be, what would be the key ingredients that, if they are missed, they can turn a product into a total flop?
Well, I think in my personal experience, one of the big, very, very important factors is UX. UX, which means user experience.
Thank you.
And yes.
But you can't. I mean, sometimes I feel I have the feeling that we have this hermetic language, right? We're talking in ML and RPA and UX and UI and.
We know we're talking about, but nobody else can understand us. Yeah, I know.
You
Yeah.
have to translate for the clients.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So the user experience is very important, and what that refers to in our field is that how your user interacts with the product. It can be where the buttons are placed so that it's easy for them to find, how the information is structured, which steps do they have to go through to accomplish their tasks. And, first of all, it has to be
And the
very
color,
intuitive.
it shouldn't be gray or blue.
Yes, yes,
No.
that's very important factor too, because in the end, a lot of the software solutions that are implemented internally into organizations, you have people that have to use it the majority of their day. And if you look at something that's bright red, for example, for 6 to 8 hours a day, there is no way you're going to be in any way calm or relaxed at the end of the day, right? So you have to take that into account when developing a product, designing a product, which colors to use and how to use them where they actually provide value and impact. So highlight certain buttons, highlight certain features, and keep the rest generally minimalistic. Let users focus on their tasks and not be distracted by your UI, which is user interface and is basically the colors and the look of the product. So very important is that it is easy to use, it is intuitive, people can easily find the information that they're looking for without having to ask anyone for it. They can figure out on their own how to use the features. If you need a manual for your product, it's not a good thing, right? You're probably in trouble.
I really like that. I really like that. If you need the manual,
yeah,
That's good.
it's something I read like a long time ago. It's UI is, or I like jokes. If you have to explain them, they're not very good,
Obviously, yeah.
So yeah.
But you can try one. I will try to laugh even if I don't get it, right?
Yeah. But when you ask a lot of people to use your product, you have to make it as easy for them as possible. And it comes back to the same, you get used to a certain way of doing things. So the more steps you have to take to get to what you need, the more it's going to be frustrating, right? So keeping things simple and intuitive is key. Now, the other one is, of course, things have to work. There's no software that's perfect. Everyone has bugs, but the flows and the processes that people go through on a regular basis have to go smoothly and have to be as close to flawless as possible. Because having one small issue here and there, you can get over it, but if it happens 3 times a minute, it builds up this frustration and you're not going to want to use the product anymore. So definitely the way you design your product from a user interface and the functionality perspective is very, very important. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is you have to do this properly at the beginning, because just as much people don't like switching from one system to another, you can't keep meddling with your own system either. It's very tempting, as a product owner, to when you look at it, you look at what you're developing day in and day out, and you're used to it, and you're like, oh, I know a way to make it better. But you can't do that, because they develop, your users develop these automated, let's say, mind processes that they go through that they're used to, and the minute you change that, is again, it's slowing them down and it's becoming frustrating. So you have to do it right at the beginning and stick to it as much as possible.
Super. Thank you, Laura, very much. We're all saying that technology should be making our lives easier, right? But for a system or a platform or a tech product, whatever, to ease your life, it needs to be fed constantly, right? With data and details and information, not just any data, but comprehensive data. But we know in practice, many times users just choose next and skip button, right? To get it over with. And then they do not enter all the details. Therefore, the purpose of that system of offering great reporting or tracking is totally missed. And Bianca, my question for you here: in the end, right, the system is not really easing our lives at all. How did you manage to convince? How did you manage to motivate your colleagues to use the system and complete all the details and forget about the skip button?
My advice here is to be, most importantly, rely on user input as little as possible. Vinny already reconfirmed in the chat box how important is it to integrate. So if it's possible and if your project is open to it, I would definitely say to try to pull everything that's possible, not based on the user input, but from other systems, from other data sources, whatever they are, by creating pre-populated fields, for example. So whatever the user needs to input is really that piece of essential information that only that user has. If you can gather something from other places, then try to do that and try to make it as automated as possible. And like on a funny side, you can make everything mandatory, Madalina, so then they cannot skip and then they cannot push next. But of course, you also don't want to do that, like give 100 fields to one person, everything is mandatory, and then you are sitting there for minutes filling this in. So what we did, integrated whatever is possible. We connected, as I said, with HRIS system, or created fields that, for example, if you select something, that in the next field only those 3 options will appear for you. That makes sense based on your previous choice. So these kind of internal dynamic solutions within the systems and also with integration. So once the user is logging in, the information is needed is really limited. And in terms of making fields mandatory, don't be afraid to make mandatory those fields that you actually really need. Because if you receive an initiation with 2 essential information missing, that you will anyway need to go out to the person, ask for it, or try to dig it out from somewhere else. So it's just going to complicate everything. Just make mandatory that you really 100% need to be able to progress and start. And everything else that you think it's a good to have, you can put as non-mandatory, but there you can actually meet the risks of not be able to use that data at the end because only 20% of people filled it in. So as I said, really internal automations, integration, and making mandatory whatever you need.
Super. Would you say there is a direct connection between compliance and tech, Bianca? On the one hand, for example, how do you make sure the system is updated? How important is security for a GM department? How do you see that?
The security, GDPR, it was, of course, in the heart of the implementation project already.
In the heart of everything.
The heart of everything. It actually became a big thing a couple of years ago when we just started this implementation. So we had these GDPR officers being on our neck all the time and checking every part of the contract, every part of the way we do. But it's good because at the end now we have a very secure and cyber secure way of managing data. In terms of compliance, tracking is really helpful. So now that we have a central database, which is available for everyone who might need that information, easy as is like expiry date of work permits, for example, or end date of assignment, it never gets forgotten because we can forget, but the system will not forget if you have a notification in place. Yeah, so these kind of things are eliminated now. We had problems like that before in the manual process tabs that, oops, somebody forgot that the work permit actually will expire soon, so we have to be very quick with the action. Now the system is a good tool for us to notify us way in advance. So in a relaxed environment, you can do the process. Also, in terms of being compliant with the data sharing with our vendors, this is what I started to refer to previously when Vinny was asking about the service providers. What we are doing right now is that we are building an ecosystem in terms of connecting not to our internal HRIS system, but trying or connecting with all the vendors' internal systems. Again, data security is a key here as well because systems are communicating with each other. So it has to happen in a really controlled environment and with a really strict mapping. So this is what's happening right now. And I strongly believe that this is going to help the compliance drive, I mean, moving it to another level, having all the information available that was so far available in different systems only.
Excellent. Super. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Bianca. To continue this question, Laura, how much did this, to continue the compliance question, how much did this play a factor when you developed the xpath ecosystem? And what other elements did you consider critical to the product?
Well, the compliance factor, of course, was very important when we developed the ecosystem. As I mentioned before, we were even looking into implementing certain automated RPA processes to take away some of this workload on the compliance side. One other thing that we want to make sure with everything that we develop is that all the data that goes in can be then exported and let's say filtered or put into a report for compliance purposes as well. The other big factor was, of course, security. We are talking about an industry where the information that is stored into the system is very sensitive. You have information about where people live, where they work, a lot of very personal and very sensitive information. So the system has to be secure by design, right? It's not even a question. I've worked in medical apps before that had to be HIPAA compliant, strict regulations, and it's probably xpath is the most security obsessed company have been involved with so far. Like every feature we discuss, we're like, okay, is this going to be GDPR compliant? How will it be GDPR compliant? How do we make sure that only authorized users have access to this data, and we avoid all close all loops and all potential for human error where something gets shared to someone that it shouldn't. So this is a big consideration for sure in terms of security. We're looking at very granular permission systems that we need to have in place, because even within the same organizations, essentially GDPR kind of, I wouldn't say it forces you, but it's a very important part of it is that you should only share critical data with the people that absolutely need it. So this is something that we're putting a lot of thought into.
And you've befriended the GDPR lawyers. I know that.
Yes, we know each other very well now. Yes.
Super. Thank you, Laura. We have a question from John David. Hello, John. Thank you for watching us. How do you think technology should be used to help assignee orientation? Bianca or Laura?
I can talk about how we are using it currently and what else I see. Right now, majority of the assignment management systems, they already have an interface that's dedicated for the assignees or for the employees relocating. We are utilizing that to share information not only relevant to their own assignment, but there are also opportunities to include a lot of information about location. Some providers have this kind of information internally, or you can also buy it from external resource and then connect and pull it to the assignees interface. So when they are moving to, let's say, London, they have all the information they need about London, about districts, currency, culture, really all those aspects. So it's already there, it's available. We are not using it yet on its full potential, and as I see, only a few companies are using it on its full potential in my network. But the goal is that you give all the information for the assignee there. But as I see that I don't have user experience with, that providing all this information, not just based on the Sentinel research team or your benchmark data, but actually on the feedback of actual people on the field, other assignees. So it's some kind of application connecting everybody, giving real-time feedback. As you, for example, you do it in Amazon, or you rate stuff and you can read other people's ratings. So this is also happening about assignment locations, and I believe it's really helping the orientation of someone who is not familiar with the location or the culture, especially. I came with London, for example. Moving within Europe, it's not a big deal, I would say, but if you move to another culture, it's not so obvious where to reach to.
Excellent. Thank you, Bianca, for that. I would like to ask you, if you were to start a new project from the scratch, do it all over again, right? Implementing tech. What three main things you would do differently?
Differently. Okay. I mentioned the testing already coming from like a timeline wise from the back. Mentioned the testing again, highlighting the importance of the testing again to save you troubles, not only immediately after the go live date, but even 1 or 2 years the go live date. So if you do have a proper testing plan, and don't just go into the system and test, but have a plan, have a testing plan, make sure to cover everything. And it's really difficult to cover everything. There are so many specifics, not only just country combinations, but different assignment types in those country combinations, different family sizes. So it can be actually hundreds of test cases, if not thousands.
Different nationalities.
Nationalities even. So all that, it's never going to be possible to cover everything. It's just never possible, or you can go testing for 2 years straight. So accept the fact that it's not going to be possible to cover everything, but try to cover as much as you can in terms of the testing. The second thing is the statement of work. It came right after the contracting. We had the statement of work signed. And the problem then was, that was already a little bit mentioned before by Laura, that you don't know what's possible. And you have your current processes, you know kind of what you want, and you have to put it in a document that's going to be the Bible for the whole implementation process. So whatever is in there, that's going to be implemented, and that's going to be there. But if something is not clear enough, so never assume that if you put something there, it's going to be the same understanding of everyone, but be as detailed as possible, so you can avoid conflicts even later, or misunderstandings. So don't assume that everybody understands what you meant there, and make sure to include everything, because as soon as you don't include something, it's going to be a change request, or it's going to be charged.
And definitely you will need it. You will need it. If you don't put it, you definitely need it at some point.
Yes. Yeah, that's also typical, that if you forget something, that's going to definitely be needed. What else? I would say, again, I know I said before, but you said three things. The third one is managing expectations. And managing expectations doesn't start with the project. It starts way before. It starts with the planning. It starts when you get your project approved by higher management, by stakeholders, when you even start to look for the best provider. It's already there. So you have to be very clear with the stakeholders what you can promise, and what you can bring to the table, and how it's going to work, and what is that they have to expect from this. The team as well. So team's expectation has to be managed from the start. A change always has to be managed. As Laura said, this is a change. And whenever there is a change, it has to be managed cautiously.
Carefully.
Otherwise, it's just not going to happen overnight, and people will not switch. So you have to keep them involved, keep them included, and then it will be a much more smoother transformation for you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for the insights. Turning to Laura and preparing to have our last couple of questions here. Time flies when you're talking about tech, right? We can stay like that like until tomorrow. Laura, what's your favorite thing about developing tech products? And the question would be actually, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, that would probably be my daughter.
Okay.
But in terms of tech, I one thing that I really like about let's say my job is that I can come up with solutions, and I find that very rewarding. I can come up with solutions with to people's problems, and actually, Bianca just mentioned something that is let's say like a personal pet peeve, which is the statement at work. A lot of the times, as a software developer, software professional, you sort of expect your client to come tell you what they need. And I personally, I don't like that, because we're the experts. We're the ones that have developed products. We know what works and what doesn't. And I don't like it when my clients come to me and tell me what they need. What I prefer instead is they come to me and tell me what their challenges are, where their problems are, and let me suggest solutions for those. Because we have access to a lot of different types of industries, and way more than maybe others. So it's easy for us to draw inspiration from other places and apply it to a new field. So I think, yeah, that would be it. Just coming up with solutions to
For clients. Yeah.
yeah, for clients.
Super. And to end, the final question to end on a funnier, lighter note here. The question is addressed to both of you. I will start with Bianca. What is your favorite and least favorite technology, product, system, platform, app, whatever you want, and why?
I wouldn't say one technology, but maybe a functionality of a certain technology.
Sure.
This is the cost estimation. It was always like a wonder to me, because before that I was struggling a lot with huge Excel tables when we were preparing the cost estimations for the assignments manually. You needed to dig out the information from 10, sometimes even 15 different resources and calculate the taxes and everything on your own. And when I first saw that you actually push a button and it starting to load, and then everything is coming, and you have the results there just in a blink of an eye, it was like a magic to me. So I'm still amazed. So I would say the cost estimation functionality.
Super. Laura?
Well, on my side, I think it's a professional defect that you look at everything and with a critical eye,
Sure.
So it's we use a lot of apps, we use a lot of tools, and it always bugs me when you have something where the functionality is not clear or it doesn't have a clear goal. So I think the one app that comes to mind that I don't like whatsoever, and I can't explain fully why, but it's generally in this field that it just doesn't. It wasn't designed well enough. Would be like probably Facebook Messenger. I just don't like using it. Like other
Yeah.
messaging apps are fine, but that one, no, not so much. Outside of that, on the plus side, what I really like is the idea of digital books like Kindle. It's just I find it very. I read a lot, and I find it very practical that if I feel like reading a specific book or just a book in a specific field, I can just instantly get it and start reading it, and I don't have to think about if it exists and go to a library and carry it with me and that sort of thing.
Super. Well, I think that would wrap up our session. It's been amazing. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us and for the great insights you have shared with our audience. Thank you, audience, for watching and for being with us. In case you need further advice or you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to my guest directly. I'm sure they'll be happy to help. Meanwhile, please follow xpath Global pages on LinkedIn and YouTube to get updates on our new live events with hot topics in global mobility sector. I will see you all on the 3rd of February when we're going to have a joint event together with the European Relocation Association, one of the most important professional industry bodies for the relocation providers. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.